Okay. Hello and welcome. Um, so this is a workshop on moving through freeze, nervous system state of freeze and overwhelm. We're going to talk a little bit about what is freeze. We're going to talk about some of the herbal supports and some of the more somatic supports. The first thing we're going to do is take your eyes off the screen. And I invite you to take a look around the space that you're in and just kind of check out where your body is in space, what the room you're in is like, where's the doors and windows, and then see if you can find something in your space that you like to see, something that you enjoy looking at. If you can't find something you like, maybe something that even just feels kind of neutral, and take a few moments and look at this thing that you like to see. And then ask yourself, how do I know that I like that? And what the kind of answer we're looking for, you might not be able to find, but we're looking for a more body-based. Do you feel a smile on your face? Do you feel a slight relaxation happening in your chest or belly? Do you feel like a sigh, a little bit more grounded? So this practice is a practice that's called orienting, and it's a good one to keep trying. Um, we as humans are very wired for, it's called, we have a negativity bias. We're very, very good at noticing what's dangerous, what's bad. Um, and that's really helpful. We need that. We want that. And a lot of us could use some more practice noticing what feels good, what feels okay, what feels safe. Um, so it's just like another nervous system kind of path that we can go down. And the more we practice it, the more kind of ready and able our nervous system is to be like, oh, I like that. Oh, the clouds look really nice right now. Oh, I feel like, ooh, the wall is blue and that feels nice. And just getting curious for yourself, how does your nervous system tell you, I like this? Some of the signs that you might look for kind of internally or physiologically, you might notice that they're sighing, you might notice yawning, you might notice your digestive system starting to kind of rumble. Um, you might notice what are called like small reorientations, where you're just kind of like, settling into your chair a little bit more. For some people, it's just like an absence of a more common bad feeling that they're kind of like low grade having all the time. You might notice that your vision seems to expand, or all of a sudden you can like hear more sounds or you smell something. So it's kind of like more of your senses are coming online. You might notice that your head is turning. So these are some of the ways that we can see that the nervous system is starting to shift into maybe not quite rest and digest, but in a little bit more of a calm place. Um, so welcome everybody. My name is Kelly McCarthy. I am a clinical and community herbalist. I did a somatic experiencing training, which is like a 3-year trauma resolution training a couple years ago. And so that's the somatic practices that I'm going to share are mostly coming out of that skill set. And yeah, I teach classes. I work with people one-on-one doing herbal appointments and somatic appointments. And yeah, we are in a wild, wild time here in America, which I think that's where most folks are. And I was just kind of, yeah, thinking about like, what's my skill set? What do I have to offer? So a lot of people I'm talking to are in overwhelm. Um, So, yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit about freeze and overwhelm. So nervous system freeze, we probably have heard of fight, flight, or freeze. And this is basically a nervous system state of a lot of activation. So this is high activation, overwhelm. And there's actually two different kinds of freeze. Um, there's like a what's called an orienting freeze, which is basically if you hear like a door slam or a gunshot or something where you go, oh, that freeze is kind of your nervous system being like, whoa, check for danger. Okay. Um, but the freeze we're talking about today is a little bit more like there's your nervous system is assessing, yes, there's potentially danger. And what is happening physiologically is that the nervous system basically has the gas on and the brakes on at the same time. And that's a hard place to be. So we have these two branches of our autonomic nervous system. So autonomic is kind of like the automatic nervous system. We have sympathetic, which is fight, flight. And then we have parasympathetic, which is the more rest and digest. And when we get up into freeze, it's basically like we've been going through a high activation. We kind of get to fight or flight. And then there comes a point where the nervous system is just like, whoa, actually, this is too much. Or there's competing impulses like, I should fight, I should flee. And yeah, we basically get the gas on and the brakes on. Um, so the some of the emotions that we might see with that are overwhelm. You might see it's not really an emotion, but maybe like behaviors, procrastination. Um, you might see like indecision or like, should I do this or should I do that? You might feel shame, confusion, hopelessness, going through the motions. These are all kind of signs that the nervous system might be in freeze. And freeze there's sort of a range of what freeze can be. It can be like just a little bit of like low key dissociation moving throughout your day, like you're not really that aware of your surroundings, you're not really that aware of your body. And then the most extreme kind of freeze is like totally catatonic, like playing dead, which we're also not really quite talking about in this workshop. That's yeah. Um, we're talking about the kind of like, we have a fascist government taking control. What do I do? Um, for example. Um, yeah, so I think one of the other things I just want to name about freeze is that freeze is a protective mechanism. Like this is a smart and wise thing that our nervous system has learned how to do. And I think that, you know, a lot of times with freeze, there can be a lot of shame and just like, oh, I should be doing this and I should be doing that. But it's a protective mechanism for when the nervous system is basically like, there's too much input. I can't take this all in, and I'm shutting some of this out. Um, so when we think about freeze in nature, we also want to think about thawing, because that's what we want to talk about a little bit today. And I don't know how many of you are like cold climate people, but um, thawing, depending on how frozen your toes get outside, thawing can be really uncomfortable. Um, so I want to share this little image to talk about this particular part of freeze where we're kind of trying to come out of freeze and why that's uncomfortable. So let me share my screen. So this is a lot of information. You don't really need to pay attention. I just like it because it has a nice big, we're looking mostly at that big like upside down U, the black line, this line here. So fight or flight is this kind of reddish zone where there's nervous system activation. We're going up. At some point, the nervous system says, I can't take all this. I'm going into freeze. And so you're a little bit like, I don't know what to do. I'm on the couch. Um, and we can hang out here for a long time. There's sometimes people will talk about kind of like functional freeze of like dissociation, just kind of going through the motions day to day. Um, and a lot of times what happens is as we are moving through freeze, when we come out of freeze, I want you to just for a second kind of think about this spot right here. So on the downward part of that graph, as you move from the blue into the red, we go from nervous system freeze right back into activation. And activation physically is uncomfortable a lot of times. It's your heart is pounding, you're sweating, you're like, there's just a lot going on. And so sometimes what can happen is as you start to come out of freeze, you get back into that zone of discomfort and you go, ah, and your nervous system goes right back into freeze. So it's like we can kind of live in that like zone of like freeze, thaw. I don't like this, freeze, thaw. Um, so what to do about this? Um, Let me get my notes back. Hmm. Okay. So what we can do about this are like little tiny, tiny little things. That's what the nervous system is really available for when we are in freeze and overwhelm. And I'll talk more specifically about what are some of those potentially little things, but some of the sort of non-herbal or somatic things that come to mind are just like making as much as you can, kind of making your sensory input nice. Wear soft clothing. Um, Turn the lights down a little bit lower. Turn the volume down on the music. Turn the TV off. Like just kind of like letting your nervous system have less input. This is not always possible because, sometimes you're at work or driving or whatever. But if you have control over your environment, let it be as chill as you can. Um, I saw a question in the chat. I'm gonna check that out for a second. Um, did you say what the second type of freeze is called? No, I don't. I didn't say. I don't know what it's called. Just I think there probably is a name, but I just think of it as freeze. So if someone actually knows that answer, please put it in the chat. But thanks for the question. Um, so we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about herbs, a little bit of time talking about somatic stuff. So there's not like secret, these are the herbs for freeze. That'd be cool. That would make my job easier. But I do think that there are herbal categories that support nervous system downshift without a like kind of crash. And the herbs that I'm going to mention in this workshop are generally safe. They don't have any major herb-drug interaction concerns. The only caution I would give sort of widely is not to use any new herbs in pregnancy. Um, but I chose herbs to talk about today that are, safe to do internally for many, many people, for most people. Um, so the first herbal category that I think is really helpful if you're in freeze and overwhelm um, are the aromatics. So aromatics is a fancy way of saying herbs that have a nice smell. I mean, I guess you can have aromatics that quote smell bad because smell is subjective. But in general, I'm talking about herbs that you personally like the smell of. So this can be lavender, rose, cinnamon, orange peel, pine, cedar, lemon, lemongrass, like kind of whatever you enjoy. Um, Part of why the aromatics are so helpful is because the olfactory sense going up through our nose bypasses parts of our brain that are a little bit more of the like rational analytical, and it goes straight to the limbic system, our like the it goes to the part of our brain that can help us calm down very quickly without having to like decide, should I be calm or not? Is this too much? Um, so aromatics are really helpful if you're in override, overwhelm. And part of why I wanted to bring up aromatics is because even if you have never used herbs before, you've never had herbal tea, herbal tincture, any of that, we all have experiences with aromatics just kind of in our environment. So this can look like burning incense. It can look like having a lotion or an infused oil that you like the smell of. And I think especially massaging hands and feet, that's like a very nice, like coming back into my body in a slow, gentle way, with something that smells good to you. And then my other favorite way to use the aromatic herbs externally are through hydrosols. And hydrosol is another way of saying aromatic, like a floral water. So like rose water, for example, is a hydrosol. Orange blossom water is a hydrosol. Um, there are a fair amount of herbalists out there who make hydrosols, but it's basically just like a water with some of the aromatic components kind of caught in it. And usually they're sprayed just like around your head or body or around the room. It's different than perfume. The smell does not last very long. So it's like, you know, a minute maybe. So I think hydrocells are especially really nice for like if you're out in public, if you work in an office and you're not trying to like light a candle in your office or something, you can still have some of those aromatics on hand. Mhm. Um, One of the other herbal categories that I think is really helpful are the non-sedative nervines. So nervine is an herbal category of all of these herbs that affect our nervous system. Most of the time when we're talking about nervines, we're talking about calming down our nervous system. That's mostly what we need. Occasionally you need to sort of, raise the nervous system, but mostly we just need to support with chilling out. Um, but there's sort of a range of herbs that like can help us feel more present, grounded, in our body, and then herbs that are like, you're gonna put you to sleep and maybe you shouldn't take much if you're gonna drive a car or something. So we're more on the side of the non-sedative. So herbs that are not going to sedate you, they're not going to make you tired during the day. They're just kind of like supportive to the nervous system in a like steady. Oftentimes they are aromatic. Sometimes they're bitter tasting. And I think the aromatic components or the bitter components that are kind of helping your nervous system say like, oh, pay attention. Okay, what's happening here? Um, so one of my favorites is lemon balm. Lemon balm is lovely as a tea. Um, you can also use it in tincture form or glycerin form, and I'll talk a little bit more about dosing in just a second. Um, but lemon balm, I think, is really nice, especially if you're kind of like, it has a strong association with bees. And I think lemon balm is nice for people who have this kind of like busy bee energy, like I can't sit down unless I'm totally collapsed, or like I can't quiet my mind. I put it in most of my sleep formulas, not because it is like sedating, but because the aromatic, like when you take in the smell of lemon balm, you just usually take a deeper breath and kind of let it out. And it is helpful for nightmares. So if that is part of your overall stress response, lemon balm can sweeten dreams. Um, Another favorite of mine is hawthorn. There's hawthorn berries and hawthorn leaf and flower. All of those are all parts of the plant, the tree are useful in medicine. I often use the berries just because they are berries and so they taste a little sweeter. But the leaf and flower work well too. Again, you can use them for tea or you can use them in tincture. Um, and hawthorn, one of the cool things about hawthorn is that the it's nourishing. The berry is can be used as a food. So for folks who are kind of like, I'm totally depleted, hawthorn berry is really nice. And it's also good for our heart. So it's good for the physical heart for people who have, family history of heart disease, personal history of heart disease, but it's also nice for the emotional heart. In May, the hawthorn flowers open and they have this like really nice, like totally spring is in the air kind of smell. And they have these huge thorns, hence the name hawthorn. And that combo is really nice. I think it to me it feels like the gas and the brakes. It's like the gas is like the flowers being like, "Come here." And the thorns are like, "Back off. Here's my boundaries." Like so I think hawthorn is a wonderful non-sedative nervine, very safe, a really like steadying kind of herb. And then the last one I wanted to bring up is Tulsi, which is also called holy basil. And I want to bring this herb in because it is easier to find in tea bags, which I think is a big benefit if you're wanting to do tea. Um, and it also does a little bit of that kind of gas and breaks. We call this herbally amphoteric. So herbs that can help kind of uplift us or calm us down depending on what's needed. Um, Tulsi, I often use with clients who are having anxiety, depression, brain fog, low energy. And I think a lot of these symptoms are also, they can be present if there's a lot of nervous system overwhelm and freeze. So a little bit about the dosing. The Ideally, herbs work best if we can use them preventively. If you're someone who's like, I go into freeze a lot, I spend a lot of my time there, having these herbs on hand and just taking them every day for the next couple weeks or months would be awesome. Um, if you're doing tea, that's like 2 or 3 cups of tea a day. And if you're doing a tincture, which is usually they're coming in bottles like this, and tinctures are concentrated extract, usually made with alcohol, although there's non-alcoholic versions. Um, and it's anywhere from like, 15 drops to a whole teaspoon. So dose range of tinctures really varies depending on the person and the herb. So if you're new to tinctures or new to a particular herb, I would start on the lower end. So you maybe for one dose might just want to do like a dropper. That's usually about 15 drops. Um, the herbs that I mentioned, lemon balm, hawthorn, and tulsi, are all safe to take at much higher doses. And I want to talk a little bit about dosing for more like acute, like I'm totally feel stuck on the couch and I can't get up. Um, the nice thing about the tinctures is that because they're concentrated, you really can take higher doses. It's hard to like really up your dose of tea without having to go to the bathroom every 10 minutes. Um, but a higher dose of tincture usually looks like taking it more frequently. So you would do like 1 or 2 droppers, and you would do that every 15 minutes for an hour. So within an hour, you have 4 doses of the herbs. And oftentimes that will help you start to make a shift and actually feel the effects of that. Um, yes, I think that's all I want to say about herbs. It's like a tiny, tiny little nugget for you. And I want to move into some somatic practices, and we'll have a little time for questions at the end. Um, so these somatic practices, um, I'm not there, you are. You're invited to try stuff. And we're kind of just seeing, is there anything that your nervous system likes? Um, Oftentimes when we're doing somatic practices, what we're kind of like, there's a bunch of ways to think about it, but one of the things we're trying to do is match where the nervous system is rather than kind of trying to shut it down or override it. So like if you are feeling a lot of like rage and anger, we want to find a somatic practice that helps you kind of like move that out rather than just like, oh, calm down. So that's part of the like thinking about these. Um, and before we get into anything specific, I want to just kind of zoom out a little bit and talk about, um, you know, a more chronic freeze, a more constant feelings of overwhelm, and especially for people who are feeling a little bit more checked out of their body in general. Um, One of the things I often start with is called the basic shit practice, the BS practice. Are you hungry? Are you tired? Do you have to pee? Do you have to poop? If any of those things are true, then as soon as possible, attend to that. This is really, really hard. It's pretty hard because for a lot of reasons, including like from age 5 being in school and, basically having to sit still and hold your pee. Um, so very early we're taught like that, what does our body need? Well, we'll wait for it. We'll have to wait on that. So we can start there. The other kind of zoomed out thing that I like people to think about kind of as homework, if you want homework from this, is to get to know your prodromal stage. And a prodromal stage is basically like before you get into overwhelm, your nervous system is going to be kind of trying to tell you like, hey, we're ramping up. And you you'll be less likely to go into freeze the more you can get to know those signs for yourself. What does your personal prodromal stage look like? Sometimes the prodromal stage is like 3 seconds because we went 0 to 100. Sometimes the prodromal stage is like a couple days where you're like, I had this stressful thing, I got a bad night of sleep, I had this other stressful thing. Um, so for me, some of the things that I know will put me in the signs that my body is telling me like, hey, you need to get, do a little bit of extra self-care, do a little bit of nervous system tending is I'll start waking up really early in the mornings, like, 2 hours before I want to get out of bed. My appetite gets really weird and I'm really thirsty. And then if I'm closer to going into actual total shutdown overwhelm, I am so irritable. No one could be more annoying than whoever is near me. Um, and usually if I'm starting to get really irritable, I'm like, oh, I'm probably overwhelmed is what's happening. So for you, what's in your prodromal stage? How is your body communicating that you're kind of ramping up? Um, yeah, so this is just sort of a thought experiment. I feel like a lot of times we get to know our prodromal stage in retrospect by reflecting on like, okay, what was going on like the last couple hours, couple days? Um, were there any signs from my body that were saying like, whoa, this is a lot? Um, okay, so some of the somatic tools that I think are most helpful for your like actually kind of feeling stuck on the couch, overwhelmed. All you want to do is watch TV or scroll on your phone or just totally veg out, which I don't want to pathologize vegging out. Like we need that. That's good. But if it's feeling like I'm actually kind of stuck here, one of the first things that we can do is to use what's called the motor image channel. And the motor image channel is basically your imagination. It's a fancy way of saying your imagination. So let's say you're stuck on the couch and you're kind of totally overwhelmed by all the news you just read, but you're really hungry, or you're not hungry, but you haven't eaten in 7 hours, so you know you need to have dinner anyways. Um, Remember that the nervous system is like, it's kind of like, I can't. So we want to start really small. And we can use a motor image channel to basically like first just picture yourself getting off the couch, walking over to the fridge, and like kind of just let your body and nervous system get used to that idea first. And this sounds like kind of silly or overly simple, but it can be really helpful um, when you're feeling stuck. Is like step one is just picture yourself doing it. And you can go through the whole thing, and you can go through the whole thing a couple times if you need before actually making any movement to do that. Um, when we're in nervous system freeze, oftentimes what would be very helpful is some kind of social engagement, some kind of connection with either a person or a pet or nature. Um, but oftentimes that can feel, especially the connection part with humans, that can feel a little bit like, oh, dicey, depending on your social identity, depending on where you're at in the moment. Um, so we can try to engage what's called the social engagement system, the part of our nervous system that really wants and needs connection in situations when you have more control over that. So some of the ways that we have figured out as humans to do this are listening to music, um, putting on an audiobook. Specifically, like an audiobook is nice to hear another person's voice. Um, Listening to a podcast. You know, putting on an audiobook and listening to a podcast can be a little dicey. We need to think about content. What's not going to be too overwhelming for your nervous system? So in these instances, it can be helpful to go back to something that's kind of like an old familiar friend. Like, I'm okay, I've read this book 500 times and let's just go through Anne of Green Gables or whatever it is. Um, Another way that we can get some of this social engagement without um, having to do much engaging, hopefully, potentially, is to be in public around people, but not engaged with people. So sitting in the public library, going to a coffee shop, sitting in a park. Um, I think this one always makes me think about like bars and whatever. We can go on a whole discussion about alcoholism and nervous system stuff, but it's like, oh yeah, I wonder how like what that is taking care of for the nervous system for people who just are kind of like, in connection, but not actually maybe interacting with people. Um, One of the questions about that reminded me of the social engagement stuff was somebody asked like, how can I co-regulate with my kids if I'm feeling overwhelmed? So that we'll talk about some more practices, but skin contact can be really helpful. Rocking with your kids can be helpful. A nice back rub can be helpful. Eye contact. Um, touch and like just soft. It's like sometimes I'm like, I did this like 3 year, many thousands of dollar training to get taught like, yeah, all those things that are like calming are, yep, they work. It's like, okay, we don't have to overthink this. So some of the other things that can help us come out of freeze, um, specifically rocking in a chair. So getting an actual rocking chair or just rocking in the chair that you're in. So this can be front to back. This can also be side to side. Oh, I don't have my blanket. Well, all right. Um, a really nice, sorry, I only have a dish towel here, but one of the nice things you can add to the rocking is to like grab a blanket and put it around your head. That is like so nice and soothing for a lot of people, or around your shoulders. Um, Another thing that can be really nice if you're in freeze is letting your eyes start to come out of freeze first. So doing that orienting practice that we did at the beginning, looking around the space that you're in, taking in the colors, seeing what in the space you like to look at, looking out the window. If you're near a window, noticing like what's moving, what's out there. Um, it is surprisingly helpful for the nervous system to just kind of like know where it is in space. So that's one that I really recommend. I also find this helpful if I'm like doom scrolling on my phone to just be like, just take your eyes away from the screen. And then I look up and I'm like, oh my God, I'm in my living room. Like it's wild how much your nervous system can really just go into a computer or a screen. Um, so letting your eyes come out and just seeing like, okay, this is where I am. Also turning your neck. So turning your neck and moving your eyes, that helps to engage there's like a little part of the nerve branch here from the vagus nerve. This is the part of the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest, that gets engaged when we are shifting our eyes side to side and moving our neck side to side. So that's another just like keep it simple. You're on the couch, but can you at least do some looking around? Um, Another thing I like to have people experiment is some self-touch. So it's just like what it sounds like. You might want to take a second and just see, is there anywhere in my body that wants a little bit more attention right now? Are there any places of tension or holding or numbness? And then just bringing a hand there and just checking that out for a few moments. Sometimes when we're in freeze and we start to slow down and notice the body, it's like, oh, this is not a pleasant place to be right now. Um, and so offering a little bit of self-touch will usually kind of turn the volume down on the like discomfort that can happen when you start to kind of thaw out of freeze. Um, in the realm of self-touch, there is a hand squeeze that I really like. So if you want to try it with me, you grab your thumb and then you stick out your finger of the hand that is grabbing, and you grab your finger. So you have a thumb and a finger, and then you just kind of go back and forth and squeeze. So one on the in breath, one on the out breath. Just practicing that a couple times. I really like this one for when I'm out in public and I'm kind of like feeling a little overwhelmed. The bilateral movement helps our brain just kind of like, okay, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing this. And it's helpful for when we feel stuck in that gas and brakes situation. Um, Another thing, speaking of that part of the nerve that comes down in our neck here, part of the vagus nerve also innervates our vocal folds. So humming and singing are another really nice way to kind of move us out of freeze. Um, so this can just be like a kind of drony hum, or I recommend, hum a song that you like. Hum a song that's comforting to you. That can be a really just simple way to do a little bit of a nervous system shifting or tending. Um, Not to mention just like, singing with your friends all the time, but it's a whole other, it's maybe not for when you're stuck on the couch with freeze. I also just really want to bring in crying. So sometimes when we're in freeze, the way that the nervous system will kind of deal with it is, well, sometimes there's some people who just kind of shut down and like fall asleep. It's like you get so overwhelmed that you're like, and I'm out. Um, and one of the other ways that our body can kind of more easily come out of freeze is through crying. One cool thing that I learned a couple of years ago about our tears is that when we're crying like an emotional, not like I'm chopping onions, but I'm emoting crying, that is the only way that the body can release whole stress hormones. So those tears actually have like bits of adrenaline and cortisol in them, which I'm just like, the body is so cool and smart, and figured out all these ways. So crying is great. Um, please cry. And, I think that's a sort of a whole other tangent. It can feel scary and overwhelming to cry. There's fear that I'll never stop crying. And, there are some somatic practices for that specifically, that would probably be more suited for like a one-on-one appointment. But, um, one of the other things that I want to mention is to take a shower or a bath, especially in low lighting, maybe with some music, but just like kind of letting your nervous system have a different experience that's a little bit more like, again, a kind of low sensory input. Um, this is my task for the next 15 minutes. And speaking of bathrooms, I think one of the other questions was somebody was like, what do I do if I'm like at work and starting to get overwhelmed and going into freeze? One of the recommendations that I really loved from the book My Grandmother's Hands by Resma Manikim, who also is a somatic experiencing practitioner and therapist, is he's like, if you're starting to get your nervous system is like getting really activated. He's like, go to the bathroom. No one ever says, no, you can't go to the bathroom. Excuse yourself. Well, not never, but excuse yourself, go to the bathroom, take a moment. If you can't go to the bathroom, like, turn around, take your sweater off. Like, just give yourself a few seconds to kind of gather, which I just like that little, like, that sometimes we just need a moment. Hmm. So there's a question here. Um, what if someone doesn't cry? What happens to the stress hormones? Luckily, there's other ways for our body. Excuse me, just a sec. Uh-oh. Our body has lots of ways of getting rid of stress hormones. Our liver breaks them down. We can pee them out. We can poop them out. We can sweat them out. So we're good. Um, yeah, but if you want to learn a lot more about stress hormones, I am teaching a class that starts on Wednesday. It's called Low Glow. It's about herbs and somatic practices for anxiety, depression, and PTSD. You can read more about it on my website. There was a link in the email that you got with the Zoom stuff. But I think the last thing that I want to say, and then I'll take a couple questions, is, well, maybe first, if people want to put into the chat what's something that you're taking away from this workshop. I think when you got a lot of new information, it can be nice to be like, what actually landed with me? What sticks out? What am I going to remember? What might I try? So if you want to type in the chat something that stood out, please do that. Um, And I think it can, yeah, be a nice way to kind of remember what just happened. Um, Sweet. Yeah, the freeze and falling asleep. One of my friends, in her 20s, her partner at the time, anytime they were having like an argument, he would just fall asleep and she would get so mad. And then, later we kind of were learning about nervous system stuff and she's like, oh, he was just totally overwhelmed. Okay. Oh man, yeah. And I think the last thing that I want to share is just I was having a conversation last night with some important people in my life, um, who were asking, what are we going to do? What are we doing in this moment? And I think that my answer was like, well, I've been thinking about what are my personal skills? What do I have time and energy for? What can I offer? Who's in my networks? Like, well, there's a whole like barrage of just scary and bad stuff coming at us right now. There has been for a long time, but it's pretty acute the last couple of weeks. Um, so yeah, I'm just like personally trying to think about what do I have to offer? What can I personally do? And I'm so grateful that we all have an answer to that. Even if it's like, I'm gonna keep checking in on my friend who's not doing very well, and I'm gonna bring them some food, or I'm just gonna text, or, you know, whatever, whatever's the thing. I should have gotten my cough drop. Um, if you want to stay in touch, I have a newsletter, but I have to stop talking. So if you have questions, you can come off mute. You can type it in the chat, but I'll hang out for another couple minutes.
I have a quick question. Thank you so much for this. Or maybe you can type it in the chat too, because I know you're not feeling too great. I missed in the very beginning the analogy you were trying to make with the gas and the brakes at the same time. Is it like
Yeah.
you're put into two different directions and that's why you freeze or
Yeah. We have within the autonomic nervous system, which is kind of our automatic nervous system, the automatic responses, the things that keep our heart rate going and our lungs pumping and all of that. We have the sympathetic, the fight or flight, that's like the gas, and the parasympathetic, rest and digest, that's the brakes. And when we are in freeze, it's basically like the gas has been on, going more and more stress, more activation, and then the brakes come on hard. And so we have both the gas and the brakes going. And we don't totally understand like why this happens. I read a couple funny like clinical um, research articles today being like, we have some ideas, but like this is all we know is what's happening, not totally why it's happening.
thank you, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Kelly. This has been really needed. My question was for the tinctures, do you just like drop them in your mouth or do you take them in water? What's the best way to take them?
Yeah. It doesn't really matter. If it's right in your mouth is totally fine. If that's like gross tasting or the alcohol is too strong or whatever, just putting it in like an ounce or two of water. Some people will just put their tincture doses in their water bottle for the day and just kind of slowly dose it like that. But yeah, kind of whatever gets it in you. Hmm.
I have a question about the sleepy thing. I don't totally fall all the way asleep, but I do get sleepy. Oh, sometimes I guess I might fall all the way asleep. And I guess the question is like, does that work? Or is it like we should be resisting that for,
Like, yes, it works. And are there reasons you need to resist it? Are you trying to have a hard conversation that you want to stay awake for? Um, sorry, I'm just like, do I have my more water in the room? Um, um, it works. And usually when you wake up, you're out of the freeze, overwhelm, nervous system thing. So it's a really, it's cool. It works. And if there's a reason, like to me, the sleep thing is not the problem. The problem is getting into freeze in the first place, which we can't always prevent that, but we can like learn about a prodromal stage, do more nervous system support. Sometimes we just like get thrown into freeze and that's that. So, but the sleep thing is cool to me. Yeah. Yeah. And then, right, then there's narcolepsy, which is like oftentimes related to stress. And also there's more physiologically going on. Um, so there's a question. I sometimes have what I understand to be a sort of vagal nerve thing. I will feel suddenly quite nauseous. But I will sneeze once or twice and it goes away. For a while, it happened very often in the morning, right after I woke up. I have traumatic dreams and I don't remember after waking. I know this is connected to anxiety sometimes for me. I don't know anything about that. That's pretty interesting to me to like hear about the sneeze thing because yeah, that's often like a little bit of a reset. Um, I mean, the only thing I'll say about nausea is that most commonly when I see nausea, it's related to low blood sugar. So more common in the morning, and sometimes just getting a little bit of like juice or a ginger candy or something can be helpful um, to like quench the nausea for a second. But I don't have more helpful information there. Sorry. Any other questions? Oh, there's some down. I gotta scroll. Yay, remember to drink your tea. Yeah, any other questions before we say goodbye? Okay. You're welcome to share this recording with friends. Um, Spread the word. We don't have to live in total overwhelm freeze. Yeah, if you want to learn more, you can check out the information about the low glow class. I also have a newsletter that I send out about once a week um, with little whatever thoughts, snippets, sometimes a fun playlist. Um, yeah, but thanks y'all for being here. And I hope, I don't know what I hope. I hope for total liberation for all of us within our lifetimes. That's what I hope. Have a good rest of your evening. Bye, y'all.